Hello, this is a tutorial for the Peasant Heel. So a Peasant Heel is an afterthought heel where a piece of scrap yarn is knitted into the sock so that you know you have like a place marker for where your heel is going to go. The afterthought heel is done. You just knit the tube and then you place the heel afterwards. You don't have the scrap yarn as a marker. So this is for the Peasant Heel where you have the marker. This sock was knitted with a Peasant Heel and I have the second one here ready for its heel to go in. So I'm going to show you quickly a Peasant Heel. So it's very similar to the way that you work a toe. In fact, it is the same as how you work a toe. If you fold it in half, you can see that it is the same construction. Now, I want to show you, I haven't done any extra fixing on this sock yet so that you can see exactly what it looks like as it's gone in. So you do get little holes. This one's a little bit worse on the other side. But they're not a problem to just seal those up afterwards. That would be fine. So we'll get on with the tutorial and you can see how to do it. So I've worked my leg to the length that I need and now I'm going to knit across the stitches that I need for a heel. So for the size that I'm doing, this is a 72 stitch cast on, so I need 36 stitches for my heel. You will know how many stitches you need for your heel with your pattern. So I did knit a stitch so I didn't lose my marker. So we're going to start straight off. You need some scrap yarn, preferably a completely different colour if you can so that it stands out. And we're basically going to knit across, join the scrap yarn and just knit across your stitches. So you've got to the point of where you want, how long you want the leg, and this would be where the back of the heel will begin. So you've knitted this is top down, and you're here. So we want the start of the heel to begin at this point. So we're going to knit across with our scrap yarn. Now don't try and weave in the ends or anything like that. You need to be able to pick this out later. So knit across your required amount of stitches. Okay, so that is my 36 stitches that I've knitted across. You will knit across whatever your required number is. And then we're just going to cut that working yarn, the scrap yarn. Give yourself a decent length of tail and just tuck it inside the sock. Don't need that no more. So you can see you've knitted every stitch for just the heel. Don't go around the front, it's just the heel section. So just the 36 stitches. And then if you're on DPNs, that could be on one DPN, you just need to come back to where your working yarn is. If you're not on DPNs, just slip them back over. So you're back at the start of your round. Okay, so once you've put your scrap yarn in and you've slipped them all back to the left-hand needle, you're now just going to continue your pattern as if that isn't there. So obviously this would now be your foot section and the heel is going to be here afterwards. So this is the foot. So your pattern could change for the foot of the sock. Usually this changed to a stocking stitch or a different colour work or something else. So just be aware of that you're now going to continue your pattern, but this is now your foot and this is still the instep. So you'll keep the pattern for the instep and usually it will change for the sole of the foot. So bearing that in mind, you'll now start working the rest of your sock. So start working your foot. Okay, so just tug your scrap yarn, just hold it with your other finger just so it's a little bit tighter and it creates a tighter stitch. as you start knitting, so you don't have a big loose stitch there. Okay, so I've worked across my full round all the way around, sticking to pattern, and you can see the scrap yarn just in there. So we're just going to completely ignore that and work your foot. Now you can work the entire foot and complete the toe and everything if you want to, and then come back, but I tend to like to knit a little bit and then come and do the heel so that I can then try on my sock while I'm knitting it so that I know I'm going to get the length right. So I'm going to go and do a couple of inches and then I'll come back and show you how the rest of it is done. Okay, so you can see I've worked a couple of inches there of the front and the back, and our scrap yarn is here. Now, you're going to need some DPNs. You could use magic loop if you wanted to. I always use DPNs for this. So yes, you need the needle size for your heel, whatever the heel is. So I'm using 2.25mm DPNs. I just find DPNs easier, but there's no reason why you can't use a magic loop for this. So what we're going to do is we need to pick up the stitches along the bottom of the scrap yarn. So we want these stitches here, this row going across the bottom. So not the actual scrap yarn itself, but the one underneath. Now, to lessen the hole at the side, you need to pick up the stitch next to as well. So you need to work along the scrap yarn, but you also need an extra stitch on either side to reduce holes. So because I've got 36 stitches along here, which was my heel, I'm going to have to pick up 38 along this one needle. And we start by finding your row that you're on. So I want this stitch here, and we pick up the right leg of the stitch. It's always the right leg of each stitch you need along the back. And your first one might be a little bit tricky because it might be hidden under a loop, but it's in there. And we're going to go across and just pick up the right leg of every single stitch along that row underneath the scrap yarn. It might get a little bit tight on your needle. And then as I'm at the very last stitch of the scrap yarn, I just want one more on that end there. Okay, so we leave those on the needle, and then we're going to pick up the row along the top of the scrap yarn. I couldn't think of the word there. So now you could turn the work and pick them up, but then you're not picking up the right leg because you've knitted in one direction, and you do need the right leg. If you were working with a magic loop, you would probably have the loop coming around this way here, and you could just pick up with the other needle going straight across. If it's a bit more easier to do, then you could turn the work, but then you would need to pick up the left leg on each section. So you need to pick up the same leg that you've picked up on the row below. So I'm going to start from underneath, and so it will be this stitch here, because it's right above, that we want, because obviously the scrap yarn, as far as we're concerned, doesn't exist. And we just need to go across this top row. So remembering to pick up extra on either side. Again, you need 2 extra stitches than your actual heel stitches. So I've got 38 instead of 36. So again, just work across, picking up the right leg. Trickier as you get to the end, because your other needle is going to be making it a little bit awkward, and then at the very end you need that extra stitch. Okay, so that is your heel stitches on the needle. You should have 38 or 2 more than your heel requires. So mine requires 36, so I've got 38 on each needle. And then now we need to pick out this scrap yarn. Now we've got our stitches on the needle. So get a tapestry needle and just, one of your stitches should be quite loose at either end. You'll have a loose stitch because you didn't weave in that end. And just give that a tug and pull it out. And then you can just work across, pulling out the scrap yarn. Just make sure you're only pulling at the scrap yarn. This is why it needs to be a totally different colour. So I'm just picking up the loops there and just giving them a little tug. Getting that out. As you get further along, it gets a little bit easier. Okay, so scrap yarn out, you don't need that no more. Put your tapestry needle away. So now you've got your stitches on your needle and you've got this little mouth thing going on. Okay, so now you're going to pick up your working yarn. Now I am still attached because I am, I've stopped my sock early to do this. You can do the same. If you can split your yarn. Luckily, my cream yarn, which is the heel colour, was in minis, so I have another mini to use. So I'm going to move my working yarn out of the way and attach this one. So now, with me using DPNs, I am going to split this so it's a little bit easier to work with. Obviously, it's hard to work with too. If you were on a magic loop, then you would obviously just push one needle out and get the other side onto a loop. We're obviously going to start with this first because this is the way that we're working. So I'm going to separate these into 2. if you were working a DPN, this is what you would need to do. Just split those in half just to make it a little bit more workable. And with my 4th DPN, I'm just going to start knitting. I'm going to attach the heel coloured yarn to the work, and I'm just going to knit across. I'm going to weave in that end as I go, so I don't need to do it later. And as you approach the end, just do as you would normally do, turn in a corner, just make sure it's not coming off your DPN or your needle, and just pull that across and just work the other side. This is our heel now, so we need to start working it. Now, with this one, I just went immediately into decreases, but it's a little bit shallow for me. I'm going to pick that out and redo it. So you can go immediately into decreases. If you've got quite a shallow foot, then it should be fine. Some people find this not a very good fit because of that, and you can knit a few extra rounds on there to like deepen the heel a little bit more to make it a better fit. So I'm going to work another couple of rounds and then I'll start the decreases. Make sure that's nice and tight as you knit across at the beginning, so that you lessen the chance of a hole there. I mean, you can stitch it up, it's not a problem. Okay, so I've worked my 2 rounds and I'm now going to start the decreases. This is exactly the same as a toe, just a wedge toe. It's the exact same thing that you're doing. You can see there. Okay, so I'm not going to place markers because my DPNs are markers. If you're on a magic loop, I'm sure your magic loop is marker enough. You can place markers if you really want to, but we're basically going to knit to 3 stitches before the end of each needle, and you would knit 2 together, and then on the other side you would slip slip knit, just exactly the same as a heel. So I'm going to work it, it's so similar to the heel, I'm actually going to work to the same number as the heel. I want 18 on each side. I want 18 in the front and 18 in the back. So I'm going to knit 1 and slip slip knit for the beginning, and then I'm going to knit to the end, to the last 3 stitches I should say. So last 3 stitches on the instep and knit 2 together, knit 1, and then work the back exactly the same. So we knit 1, slip slip knit, and we're going to knit to the last 3 stitches of the back. And last 3 stitches of the back, we're going to knit 2 together and knit 1, and then our next round is all knit, and so on and so forth until we have the right number of stitches at the end. So for me it's 18 on each needle, 36 stitches. So I'm going to go away and do that, and I'll come back and show you the end. Okay, so we are now at the point where the heel is finished knitting it. Oh, that's my dog knocking things over. So you can see it there. So now all we need to do is seal this up with Kitchener stitch, or your favourite grafting method. So split your stitches onto the 2 needles as you would exactly the same for the toe. So I'm going to seal that up now. Okay, so just as you would with the toe, just seal that shut with your Kitchener stitch. Okay, so I'm going to tighten up the Kitchener stitch. And there we go, this is your peasant heel. Now it's not too bad here, pretty good. This side I do have quite the hole, so it could happen. If I find out a way to stop that from happening, then I will do another tutorial and show that. But I'm just going to stitch mine up for now. But there we have it, and your partridge heel all done. And then you can continue the rest of your sock now, and you're able to try it on as well if you haven't knitted right to the end, which is the way that I like to do it. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching.